Beyond 3D. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back this week to another edition of Beyond 3D. Hello, Matt.
Clint, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to be back.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
It's great to be back.
Doing well.
Now, you've got something awesome to present to everybody tonight.
We got together with our sister show, Soul to Soul, and got to interview somebody we interviewed last year who we had a great time with by the name of Duncan Rhodes.
Now, Duncan, last year when we had Duncan on the show, we didn't expect to get the awesome interview that we got. We only wanted him to come on so we could help him promote the Nexus conference.
Absolutely.
And Duncan just loaded up with a whole list of information that he was able to share with us, and it was just mind-blowing.
Absolutely. It was actually fantastic as far as I'm concerned. I thoroughly enjoyed that interview then.
Now, I was missing in action the other week. You
were on assignment
I was on assignment the other week, so
yes.
That was when yourself and Steve and Patricia got together and did this interview with Duncan.
Absolutely.
I've had a little listen to it because it is a pre-recorded interview.
Yes.
It is awesome.
Oh, yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and quite frankly, I'm looking forward to the Nexus conference coming up, which is the 18th to the 20th of June, up on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. It'll be an absolutely spectacular conference to attend and go to, so I think the guys will love listening to this interview with Duncan. And
can I also say,
yes,
Christopher Turner in the United Kingdom this weekend is doing his RepCon conference.
Ah, yes.
I had a little quick chat to him this morning.
Oh, great.
I told him we'd give him a shout out tonight to help promote his conference in the United Kingdom. So if anybody's interested in that, or they want to jump online, Google Christopher Turner and Don't Mention the Reptilians and RepCon, which is on this weekend in the United Kingdom.
Excellent.
I was also going to mention today, I was going to talk about CERN, but we haven't got time for that. No, don't laugh. Don't laugh. They have been doing some incredibly dodgy stuff over the last 2 weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
No, we're going to have to do something. We're going to have to say something about that at some point in time.
No, I'll hold that for next week.
We'll have to hold that for next week. But that is very important, and I've been looking at a few interesting little videos that we'll have to talk about next week as well, which concern the moon.
Yes, I saw some stuff about the moon this week as well, and I also saw some stuff about the hollow Earth theory.
Ooh, I love that theory.
Because everybody's been bashing on about the Earth being, not everybody, I'm generalising when I say that. A lot of people have been talking about the Earth being flat. There's that whole closed mind theory where people are going back to people have been mentioning the Earth being flat again. And like I said the other week, go stand in the corner and have to think about what you're saying when you're thinking that. But hollow Earth, that's a totally different story.
Totally different scenario, and quite frankly, flat earthers, get a life. I'm sorry, that's the most pathetic thing I've ever heard. Get real.
What's that, a two-dimensional planet?
Oh, come on. That is the... Oh.
Come on, Dunk, let's go. Nexus. Let's get to
okay, look, Nexus conference on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of June, up on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. Some fantastic topics. Fantastic people that are going to be speaking there. You'll want to attend that. You can go to the website, nexusmagazine.com. Under events, it will give you all the information you need to know. But for now, we would like to leave you with a fantastic interview with Mr. Duncan Rhodes.
Beyond 3D.
Hi, Duncan here.
Good morning, Duncan. Matt Adams here from Beyond 3D. How's it going?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm sitting here with Patricia and with Steve Meyers, so we wanted to talk to you about...
Hi, guys.
Hi, Duncan.
Hello.
What we wanted to do is to just talk to you, get a catch-up from since the last time we talked to you when Eric Von Daniken was out. So we'll start by saying welcome Duncan Rhodes to Beyond 3D, and welcome Duncan Rhodes to Soul to Soul. And what we would like to do is to get an inkling from you on, first of all, the Nexus Conference of 2016, which will take place on the Sunshine Coast at the end of June, from the 18th to the 20th, I believe.
Correct.
How has it been as far as setup is concerned? A feat of legerdemain, I would guess, but as far as the setup for this conference, what do you go through? What's your procedure? What are you looking for, especially in this time, in this day and age?
Well, number one, I break the rules on everything, including publishing and event management with conferences. In the last 10 years, I've taken a shift to structuring conferences around the topic rather than around the name. Obviously, I try and find what's the best and most relevant name available to match the topic. But for me, it's the subject matters which I feel is important to see get discussed. Mostly a conference. It's like a show business concept. You structure an event around the talent and use the talent's publicity, or you're making talent. I go the other way. So I have a good working relationship after doing Nexus and other magazines for 30 years with a lot of the writers and researchers in those fields. And so I often have speakers at my conferences which might not be the same choice for overseas events. I go for what I believe is the best quality talent on those topics. And each year I trial one or two speakers out of left field who are new. I take a punt on them. Sometimes I bring in someone from overseas that I've heard a lot about, who's got an interesting message, and I want to find out more for myself about the nature of the person. Are they for real, in other words? So there's a bit of personal curiosity in play in there. The other thing I have at the back of my mind is I sort of have a understanding that the universe arranges itself around what people are interested in and what they're putting out. Now, I feel, just like with this radio show, that there's absolutely no accident as to who ends up turning up at the conference, what they actually hear and take from it, and this is just the same as this radio show. Whoever's tuning in and listening to this radio show right now, it's no accident. There is some piece of information that they have attracted into their lives, and it's just a matter of what vehicle they're attracting that information through. Conferences and magazines, radio shows obviously are putting out lots of interesting information, but it's no accident when you tune in and you get a snippet or something. It's your higher self, if you like, putting out or responding to your desire to find out an answer to something. Whether or not you agree with the answer initially is often besides the point. For example, at some of our talks are all 90 minutes long, which again breaks the rule. Generally speaking, people aren't considered smart enough to have an attention span past a certain point. It's the same with articles at Nexus. We break all the rules. And one of the things I believe people are curious and intelligent, and if you're interested in something, the attention span is, part of the enjoyment. The longer it takes to enjoy yourself, the better. However, at some of these conferences, people do literally fall asleep halfway through or whatever. So I feel that information is going in at a subliminal level, if nothing else. So I put out to the universe what subjects I'm interested in, and it's fascinating to see what people experience. I'm talking about the speakers and the researchers, because I put out and contact quite a few, and a lot of people love the idea of a free trip to Australia and maybe a few extra talks on the side, get to see around, all expenses paid, and go home with a little bit of money in their pocket. So there's no shortage of people wanting to come out, unless they're really busy, in which case we can often organise a Skype. But it's fascinating to see what changes occur in those people's lives from the point of initial enthusiasm to come out and whether or not they're meant to be speaking at that conference at that time. And so, there's always a few changes. You start off with one list of names, and by the time you go to the stage, it's rearranged itself a little bit. We've had a couple of such changes during the structure of this one, but we're looking like we're on a set course now. So what you're seeing on the website is, at this stage, what we believe is going to happen, and there's no reason otherwise to suspect that. And I'm really pleased with some of the topics we've got this year.
Duncan, Steve here. One speaker you've got on this in this particular year's conference is Peter Smith, who's talking about the afterlife and alternative realities, which is absolutely fascinating to me. Can you tell us a bit about what he's going to be doing there?
Yeah, he's actually based down in Melbourne, down your way. You should get him onto the show. Interesting chap. Peter comes from one of the subjects I've always covered in a Nexus conference is the topic of getting information from remote viewing, astral travel, from entities who are not yet born or who have died or are halfway in between. So this whole concept of, do we have one life? Do we have many lives? Do we have multiple, infinite number of probable simultaneous lives? And if so, do those entities or those consciousnesses, do they relay information? Now, Peter Smith was referred to me by Barry Eaton. Barry Eaton is a bit of a psychic, and he's written books, or he's written at least one book on basically life after death.
Yes,
a lot of it's based on communications and experiences. Yeah. So he recommended Peter Smith, who he'd seen speak at a conference, and Peter is trying to, I guess, take this whole field of research into consciousness and past lives, and he's putting a bit of maybe a Western science spin. Hang on.
Mm-hmm.
And so the word quantum consciousness appears in there too. I tend to look at consciousness from a scientific perspective. I believe it exists, and obviously self-aware. I like to see discussion on it move away from religious, even New Age and spiritual contexts. I try to avoid, because for me that's all part of what I generally call the control structure. A lot of the traditional New Age structures, so to speak. So when you get researchers who are connecting with real life experiences, people, their own, etc., they're able to bring valid information through to our reality for us to use to get a greater picture. It's like going up in a helicopter. You have a view of the terrain around you at ground level. Sometimes it can look quite foreboding. You can't see any way out. If you get a temporary helicopter effect and you go up vertically 50, 100, 500 feet, you get a completely different picture. And on that example, I might add, the further you go up, the more of a different picture you have. As you go, what you thought was the last big picture is part of a small fragment of a larger big picture, and theoretically that goes on to infinity. So I believe that understanding the nature of consciousness, understanding that there is more than one life, leads to the understanding that there is no death. Belief in death in our culture is one of the biggest social control tools ever devised, the fear of death, and death being the end. And it's not the case. So if you can start to wedge open the door that life goes on, in this day and age with international travel, when a loved one goes to live in another country, presumably married, settled down, like emigrate, we do mourn their absence, but at the back of our minds we know they're still alive, so we don't consider them dead. We need to get to that state of mind when people die in the physical body. They're still alive somewhere, they're just not here. And I think that's a phase that mankind's going to be moving into, and I think it's a very healthy phase to consider. It takes away a lot of the fear around our existence if we start to embrace a larger picture like that.
Yes, I agree, actually, yeah.
It makes us less controllable too. I've got to stress, the belief in death and the subsequent fear of death as a result of that belief is the biggest social control tool put onto mankind, and it hasn't always been that way. And you see that in some of the native cultures where there is no fear of death, but obviously they try and avoid it because it's more fun being alive.
Indeed, yeah.
Beyond 3 D.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Stan Deo says hello.
Oh yes. Stan. When I took over Nexus magazine back in the really early 90s, one of the first events I wanted to organise was getting two of my most favourite, interesting people while they were still alive and milking them for all the information I could get out of them. One was Stan Deo, and the other was Bruce Cathy from New Zealand. So I flew them over in 1993. I flew them over, one from Western Australia. Stan was living in Perth.
Yeah.
And Bruce in Auckland. I flew them over to Sydney, and we did a weekend conference in Chatswood, and then up to Brisbane, and we did a weekend conference up there. We only had about 80 or 90 people. As you can appreciate, they were all total crazy tech heads, mad scientists. And the whole weekend was all about, totally looking at their science and looking at it from every point of view. A lot of discussion from the audience. We filmed it. It was pretty hard to make a package out of that because you need to be a total nerd to understand a lot of what they were talking about. But it was really fun, and as people, I found them genuine, warm, and most interesting. Stan Deo is one of the most interesting chaps. I got to spend a bit of time with him. As you know, he's a total fundamentalist, end-of-the-world Christian.
Yes.
In the back of his mind, he is emotionally expecting the rapture, the ascension, the whole, fundamentalist Christian end times. He has been expecting that to happen within weeks or months ever since I've known him, and that was 25 years ago. I mean, this is a person who lives expecting it to happen. And he's continually seeing validation of his expectations, through the scriptures, through prophecy, through the development of technology, the mark of the beast, no man can buy nor sell. I mean, you can't say that generally speaking it's not happening. But he expected it to happen decades ago, and to a large degree he is still waiting for it to happen. And I suspected, how can a man this intelligent, this smart, this out of the box with such a great sense of humour, how can he be so fixated on this Christian thing? I mean, what was it? So I had the question in my mind, and when he was staying at my place one time, we were chatting, and I said to Stan, did you ever have any missing time experiences in your life? And he said, well, yes, Duncan, when I was in the Air Force Academy, there was myself and a couple of other students found ourselves with quite a few hours of missing time. And I said, was it related to, your training, or do you think it was, not related? He said, no, it happened on the base. And I said, do you remember anything? And he said, yeah, lots and lots of numbers. He said, that's all I remember is lots of numbers. Now, I speculated at the time, and this would have been in the 60s, that that the military were experimenting with certain humans to use their physical brain as a type of biocomputer and just number crunch stuff. But you have to turn the consciousness off in order to use the brain to do that. It sort of has been demonstrated with stage hypnotism, where you turn the judging, rational thinking thing off, and you tell the person, okay, you're a chicken, or when you hear this noise, you're going to turn right and walk in a circle and forget these instructions. The brain is capable of doing things like that upon instruction, but you've got to turn off the overriding personality. So I speculated, based on other tidbits of information, that's probably what happened. He then relayed to me a very interesting thing. He said there is one strange thing, and I said, what's that, Stan? And he said, when we were being dismissed from the academy and we were finished, he said the three of us who had the missing time experiences, I think it was three, were summoned to the Commander-in-Chief's office, and they were standing there attention, and he said, stand at ease. He looked up and down and said, okay, young man, he said, what is your biggest goal in life? Now, these are three guys who are absolutely patriotically trained in the Air Force, wanting to serve their country, go out, fly planes, do stuff. All three of them snapped to attention, saluted, and yelled out at the top of their voice, to serve the Lord our Jesus Christ. Sir, yes, sir, words to that effect. And then they all looked at each other in shock and amazement, because their bodies had done this against their conscious desire, will, or knowledge. So there's definitely some form of mind control or using the brain of Sandeo in the past, and I believe that's where this incredible Christian perspective has come from, because it doesn't gel with the rest of his personality. That you look at a fundamentalist Christian, and I've met lots of parts of the spectrum of them. There's something uniform about them all, but Stan hasn't got it, and that's why I'm not surprised to see that happen. But it's another example of a great person. I mean, I have nothing but warmth and respect and love for the guy. But he's running around with this thing in his head, and he knows it. So what is he doing about it? I mean, he told me that story. He knows, therefore, that they messed with his brain and put an incredible love and respect for Old Testament, biblical stuff in his brain, and they obviously said, "Don't you dare go and weed it out," because he doesn't. But it's an interesting world.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because when we were interviewing him last week, and quite frankly, I did pick up the fundamentalist side of him, but there was something he said quickly, and then it disappeared, and I think it goes into what you were talking about, and what he basically stated was he had an out-of-body experience where the words he actually used. And when I heard that and everything else that he is doing, because we went through it, and he brought up his Google Earth maps, and he was talking about the Exodus and how he could draw the lines and show everything and everything how it went. But this out-of-body experience, he said, really changed him. And then I started talking about different things, which I'll get into with you as well, about UFOs and things along those lines, and he was totally open to that. And a fundamentalist Christian, in my opinion, wouldn't be open to anything like that either.
Exactly, yeah. And he's been aware of that level of... He's been aware of the UFO situation since the 70s. It's been parallel with his Christian perspective. Last time I spoke to Stan, I was pleased to see that he didn't equate aliens with the devil or demon, that he was a bit more wider. In America, most fundamentalist Christians their explanation for aliens is either the work of Satan if they're real, and the demons, otherwise Jesus would have mentioned them in the Bible, type of thing. If you're in the religion of science, they don't exist until proven, and whoever is in charge of what's decided to be proof has the final say on when that occurs. But look, Stan's had his share of mystical experiences, but when you are in a belief system, whether it's a religion or a New Age one, etc., you're always going to see validation of your beliefs. It's like when you take on a belief system, you put on the equivalent of rose-coloured glasses. You put on rose-coloured glasses, you see everything in a different colour, a rose hue. You put on green-coloured glasses, you're going to see a green tinge in everything you look at. When you're a Christian, you have on Christian-coloured glasses, and you see validation for what you believe. It's like the universe can't help but to validate what you believe in. Is my fundamental philosophy.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Now, the other thing I want to get into was the fact that this was just a statement that was made, and I just want your opinion on this. NASA announced that they found more than 1,200 exoplanets out there. They now are publicly saying they exist. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's part of what I call the controlled disclosure. You've got to bring the background context for new breakthroughs and understanding and new acceptances. The biggest resistors to the idea of disclosing that we're not alone in the universe aren't just the Christians, it's the scientific community and a lot of people who feel that they're, stick to facts, the mechanistic, rationalistic people. They will happily believe what their experts tell them without qualm. A lot of them secretly want to believe we're not alone, but they're too scared, to stand out. With the Christians and the religious people, the Muslims are not going to have a problem about being alone. The Catholics aren't. The American Christians are going to have a big problem. And, so that's really it. But you've got to see the background. You've got to establish that there is planets do exist that can hold life, and then the more planets you tell that for the last 10 years, every now and again you get an announcement. We think we found an Earth-like planet around this star, just one out of the blue. But that's been going on. There's seeded the ideas about water on Mars from the mainstream. The background seeding is there. There are now lots of planets out there that can sustain life. There's more and more people making claims about UFOs. Hillary Clinton is mentioning UFOs and disclosure a few more times than is usual in her election campaign, being jumped on in the alternative media, dissected every direction. But I would say that somebody is getting mankind to be aware that we're not alone, and this is the background for it. I believe that they've known a lot of information at NASA for a long time. I believe NASA at the high levels is using technology which is, like Ben Rich from Lockheed said, we have the technology to take ET home. It would make your mind bend. Where behind the scenes they have a level of technology that would be like science fiction. So I believe NASA has known for a long time, as have people in the know, that we're not alone. They're using technology, they're having dialogue, they're doing projects and missions together. But at some point, there is the idea that mankind needs to be brought up to speed. And how do you do it without destroying the infrastructure that mankind uses to sustain itself? And information of this, depending on how it's presented, could cause incredible panic and chaos, which will translate to stock markets, which will translate to food, transportation, or it could be just accepted without a lot of fuss. It depends how it's done. If mankind discloses the facts and you get the Pope, the presidents and world leaders up on the stage and they're all united saying this is the case, and you've got religious leaders and Stephen Hawking and everyone all saying this is the case, we're not alone, this is what we know, blah, 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 that would be accepted one way. If they fly and land or they hover in the skies above us, that's going to be a different scenario. So it's just a matter of time before more and more people start to ask questions. More and more people are having experiences with what we'd call non-humans or extraterrestrials. So somewhere along the line they have to come clean, and announcements like that are what you would expect to see.
Beyond 3 D.
I see, Duncan, Dr. Michael Seller is going to be talking about parallel and secret space civilizations as part of the conference.
Exactly what we've been talking about. Yeah, look, everybody in this game has got whistleblowers or contacts. I've had quite a few over the years. I've had one or two which I've had good reason to believe were in the know on this whole secret space civilization. One of them, who's now dead, told me how he was briefed into the existence of extraterrestrials through his security intelligence service background. He was also bloodlined, which made sense. And, I mean, literally, there is an ET 101 manual. That's not the exact name of it, but when you come from not knowing about the extraterrestrial situation and you're brought up to speed on it, there's a bit to read. And so I actually spoke to one person on the planet who I totally know was in that. He was part of the RAND, part of RAND, Rubicon, that whole thing. He was a multi-hatted operator for different agencies. But his father, who was a general or high up, was in on the extraterrestrial secret civilization thing many, many decades ago, and he was the only son who was made privy to it. And so I said to him, I said, well, what's it say in the book? And he says, well, you already know what it says, Duncan. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, it's the reptilians, and the greys sort of run around as their sort of, lackeys and servants in their biosuits. But he said the reptilians run this planet and pretty much made mankind, and that's the deal. I mean, there's lots of other details. So that's what this person said. So I have no doubt, based on my own myriad of experiences, that we are not alone, not even in the solar system. We've published articles in Nexus which suggest that Nazi Germany got hold of a very advanced technology prior to World War II, moved it to the Antarctic and developed it further, and that's what Operation High Jump tried to either remove or take control of, but failed because of the difference in technology. Eventually, deals have been cut. Obviously, we don't live in a Nazi-controlled world with a swastika flying over us, although some might argue that it doesn't matter. We've got a variety of flags. It doesn't really make any difference at the end of the day. But obviously, that technology never made it into the public. Stan Deyo, getting back to him, he was very vocal on the fact that during the 1950s, that there were multiple public projects, or not public, but there were in public domain projects on anti-gravity and teleportation, with some very startling results, so much so that in the 1950s there was at least one TV midday current affairs show, a bit like Midday with Ray Martin or whatever, back in the 50s, where they had scientific experts on talking about how by the end of the year or at the end of next year they expect to have teleportation operational for freight transportation systems around the planet. I mean, and then all of a sudden, it was like one day a curtain of secrecy came down, and scientists and researchers sometimes found themselves on the side of the curtain where they were told, oh, I'm sorry, what you've been working on doesn't exist anymore. Please sign all these papers, you won't talk about it, da-da-da-da-da. So we know the curtain of secrecy came down. We know a lot of disgruntled people. Stan Deyo knew some of those scientists. He befriended and spoke to people whose job it was to deliver already existing technology to places like Bell and Lockheed for reverse engineering to be put into the commercial sector. So lasers, silicon chips, I mean, there's a whole bevy of things in the commercial sector which Stan would say is totally derived from reverse engineering alien technology. Back to the secret civilization. So the question comes down to, well, what the heck's going on? From my perspective, what I do know is this. Mankind has developed more than once technology which we would call anti-gravity free energy. We've got spaceships which can flit around faster than the speed of light with inertialess drive, so you're not flying against the side of the spaceship when it accelerates or does a 90-degree turn. Inertialess drive is probably the one thing, believe me, inertialess drive is probably the one thing most researchers need to get their head around the most, because, anti-gravity faster light's one thing, but inertialess drive, if you work that out, you get the understanding of what's really going on. It's more than just the use of the ether. Anyway, back to what we're talking about. So the question comes down to, well, who is doing what with whom? My understanding of behind the scenes is mankind and various other factions. Some factions involve humans working with other species. Some factions are just other species. But there's a lot of activity in the solar system and out through space. What I have deduced at the end of the day is each of the civilizations and non-humans, as you want to call them, are basically out there doing their own projects for their own interests. A lot of them are resource-based, and they have needs for resources which in some cases we can't comprehend. but that's just a fact. Humans are no different. We have resources, we have need for food, warmth and shelter, so we believe, and we go out and we often kill other life forms to sustain our own. It would be a mistake to assume that we're not alone in the universe and that as above, so below doesn't exist. Just the same as what we do, there are life forms in the universe that want resources. They have no qualms about destroying other life forms to get what they want. Fortunately, the more advanced and more intelligent you become, you realise that logically you can go further and survive better and have a better quality of life, even out in space as a civilization, by cooperating rather than competing and fighting. So cooperation and unity works best for everybody more than conflict and shit fighting. And it seems to be, as civilizations have evolved, the peace it just goes along with the ride as part of it. You get more progress in peace on what they're looking for than you do with war. But there are all sorts at play around Earth. Now, obviously, from my perspective and from the perspective of many people dialoguing about secret space civilizations, people like Michael Saller, the idea is that in our human case, all the ancient records and Zecharia Sitchin would suggest that mankind is an owned and created species by one of what we'd call extraterrestrials. So if that is the case, and I believe that it is, mankind as a species was created for a purpose, like a hybrid crop of cattle. Now, when you've invested a lot of time and money into a hybrid crop of cattle, you're not going to invade them, you're not going to attack them, you're not going to wipe them out. You're going to use them for what you use them for, and you're going to want more cattle. That's my perspective about whoever created mankind and why we're here. There's no interest in wiping us out. How can they invade or attack us when they made us in the first place? So they've been here the whole time running the show. So I don't buy into a lot of the fear and we're being invaded, we need to defend the human species. That energy, that frequency, that concept of we're being attacked by foreign extraterrestrials from other dimensions, whether you put them under the guise of Satan or the reptilians or whatever, the whole concept of we're under attack by these bad guys, we need to defend ourselves, is a concept inserted into the alternative community by the same people who run the show. And that's a very important thing. They need that fear-based response for one of their future scenarios, which is, oh shit, we're not alone, and guess what? They're trying to eat us all the time. We've been hiding this technology to defend mankind, but now you need to do what we say in order to defend ourselves. It's the same tactic. You've seen that famous quote from Goebbels or whoever it was during World War II. Tell a nation that's under attack, make them feel, give them a bit of evidence, do a few false events. That nation will do anything you want. It doesn't matter what political ideology they were under in the first place. If someone feels they're under attack, they will jump to do whatever is necessary out of fear. And so it's the same in the alternative community. I don't see any evidence and reason that we are under attack from anyone. And honestly, if some strange race came here and started attacking us, the people who created us and whatever, they're the ones who'd be doing the defending anyway, because it's like, if you create a new strain of cattle, say the super drought resistant, super tick resistant, wonderful meat tasting flavoured cattle, and you came up with a patent, you hybridised them, and you grew them, and you raised them, and some other turkey came along and started rustling them, you'd chase him off. You don't expect the cattle to do it. You're in charge of your stock. You will take control of it. That's what happens with mankind, from what I can understand and from what I've learned. It might sound a bit dismal, a bit bleak, but when you look around, it's as above, so below. It's going on at every level, and as a planet, it's no different.
While we're talking about different species, I notice also there's a lot of people talking about giants and little people during the conference as well. Where do you find that they fit into the picture?
Well, we live on a planet which is full of billions of other life forms. We call them plants, insects and animals, and we take them for granted, and we get really fussed up and amazed when we see one that we haven't seen before and we presume it's come from somewhere else. I don't understand anymore the amazement when we see when we're discussing life forms from other planets. It's like, I don't get that amazed about a life form from South America that I've never seen before. I accept that they're there, and so what? Yes, I like to go and look at them, and blah blah blah. So number one, the idea that we live on a planet with other life forms is something I'd like people to reevaluate, because we're sharing the planet with other life forms that hide themselves from us deliberately for their own protection purposes, or because they find us quite disgusting, primitive, or gross. What we call the little people have existed. They exist partially in this dimension and partly in another. And this is another concept which I hope discussion on these topics brings out, is that, you know, the idea that we might be the only species floating on a rock through space is such an archaic idea that needs to evolve. We need to move along to I mean, people say we went from being primitive to thinking the Earth was the centre of the universe to understanding that we're just one planet out there. So it comes to the larger picture, this dimension of reality we're in. We assume we're all on the same rock, hurtling through the same space-time continuum. Nothing could be further from the truth. It just looks that way. If you consider that we know dimensions go on up into technically infinity, when you look at a two-dimensional surface, which is like a flat sheet of paper, and just looking at the top, it's composed of an infinite number of one dimensions. A three-dimensional object is composed of an infinite number of two-dimensional objects. So a fourth-dimensional universe is going to be composed of an infinite number of three-dimensional universes, which is what we currently exist. We think there's only one three-dimensional universe and that we're all inside it. That is not the case. You get focuses of concentrated, if you like, clusters of civilizations, consciousnesses in one place for one project, like here on planet Earth, which attracts lots of other co-inhabitants. The little people, what we call the giants. The giants, I don't believe so much exist in the traditional sense as they do today. Hugh Newman coming out talking about giants at our conference, he's mainly looking at that from the historical perspective. It's not widely known, but the Catholic Church sent, through the secret societies, there was orders issued basically to find out and kill all the giants they could around the planet and report them back. Captain Cook apparently had secret instructions to report any recordings of giants back to head office. There were giants detected down in Patagonia, which were investigated by different admiralties, etc. But what was very interesting is that not many people were aware that some of the first Western sailors to go around the planet were the Portuguese, and then came the Spanish, and then the Dutch, and the English, etc. But the Portuguese archives are going to be the most interesting because they got to the most far-out places before any other white man or Western civilization. And everything they saw and noted was reported back to the Vatican through the Jesuits. The Portuguese were the first into parts of South America and North America, and when they were sending sailors into the Gulf of Mexico and up the Mississippi and those rivers, they were astonished to report whole settlements, towns and villages of giants. We're talking 12, 13-foot high, villages of giants. So there were newspaper and, well, not newspaper, there were reports from the Portuguese from quite a few expeditions into North America of these giants. Now, obviously, within a century or two, they're all gone, and the suspicion is that diseases coming from Europe hit North America in different waves, and on it went, because there was contact made. But they were written up and reported, sometimes in journals and in papers. But unless you can speak old Portuguese, you're not going to know about them. So Hugh Newman and some of the people from spinning off from Ancient Aliens have been diving into the archives and coming up with amazing examples of the giants. There are, for those interested, there are definitely what I'd call a few giants living around, but they'd more come under the category of what we call Yowies or Bigfoot. And there's definitely a variety of them on the Solomon Islands, which are 10, 12 foot tall, generally speaking. And the natives over there, they've got no problem knowing that they exist where they exist on the island. So they are alive in modern times. The little people, though, really fascinate me, because all the people I've spoken to have had interactions with little people, and most of them have been Aboriginal elders, although I've had a chat to one policeman, and a National Parks ranger contacted me a couple of decades ago about his experiences. They definitely are in Australia. They're about 3 foot tall, about 4 foot tall. They look like children, generally hairless, humanoid, live underground. They used to interact a lot with the Aboriginal culture before white man came, more in the sense of taking gifted children to live with them in their civilization, where they'll train these children into conscious out-of-body travel, instinctive use of herbs, minerals, rocks, timing of seasons, planetary bodies, just what we'd call arcane and esoteric knowledge. Those kids would often be what we'd call the Kadaicha men, the ones wandering around doing miracles, pointing bone, dispensing justice, teleporting and all that sort of stuff. I was told by at least 2 elders back in the 80s that the little people told the Aboriginals that white man was coming, and they would that the little people would no longer be seen with the Aboriginals, but they would resurface again in the future when the time was right. But I've been told by Aboriginals they still see the footprints in certain caves around Australia. Now and again, white people do see them, and now and again those stories filter down to publishers of weird magazines like myself. Not so much because the person with the experience wants the attention. It's usually because the person with the experience wants to know whether they were alone, whether they're the only one who's had that. Have I heard of anything else? So, they're certainly around, and they seem to not require advanced physical technology. They seem to have more mental understanding of what's going on, which bypasses the need for the technology. So that's the reason why we've got that being talked at the conference, apart from being fascinating on its own. It's the implications of it, for me, which are, the other one which feeds into this is David Paulides. I really hope you guys cover this topic on your show at some point. David Paulides is a US law enforcement investigator who, a long story short, was found to be researching missing persons numbers in a certain national park. He got stalled, and basically, they didn't want him to know the extent of the numbers of missing people in this national park or any of the others, purely because the numbers are astronomical. So he started researching, and he only focused on the missing cases which didn't involve a whole lot of criteria. Like if you had been on antidepressants or had a history of depression, you're not on his case files. He only takes the disappearances which are truly extraordinary, and you have no idea how many people have gone missing under the most extraordinary circumstances in national parks and other places in America. I mean, this is only national parks and only the really bizarre ones, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And you read the book and you start to realise that some of the disappearances in Australia have the same characteristics. Now, I'm fascinated to hear from this speaker what he concludes is at work, and I suspect from what I've read of him and spoken to him, he concludes not one thing is happening, but we share this planet with other life forms, and some of them don't physically exist in our space-time continuum, in our dimension or this reality, as much as we do. They can come and go. And that to me is really, truly fascinating. It ties in with the stories that fascinate me about, like, an Australian couple driving from A to B one night, and they go through some part of the world and see, dinosaurs or old buildings. I mean, people were experiencing time trips more and more. We're having more cases reported in the media of people who wake up one day and the world has changed dramatically from the day they knew it before, but everyone in this world says, no, this is normal.
Beyond 3 D.
Yes, I must admit, Duncan, we're coming across a lot of those stories as well.
The more you look, and the internet, as much as I, denigrate the internet for being a total surveillance tool, which it is, more and more people are sharing their interesting experiences. So for researchers like me, who want to see, how many people are starting to experience reporting, because when someone reports it, it's only less than 10%. Some people say around 1% report a weird or mystical experience on a forum or to a UFO group or whatever. So most of the weird experiences are not reported. So when you look at the sheer number of weird things that are discussed and reported out there, and you think that that's even 10%, that's a heck of a lot of people really sitting on some amazing experiences and information out of fear of ridicule, out of fear of rejection, or both. And, wouldn't it be nice to have a society where people can share their interesting experiences and we learn from them, and our understanding of the scientific structures of reality expand from it, instead of just sweeping under the carpet and trying to keep it all neat.
Absolutely.
We've been doing that for centuries through religion. We're doing it again using the religion of science, which isn't even loyal to its own, tenets. And but at the same time, we are increasing in a type of frequency where people are having more and more experiences, more and more awakenings, and something's got to give. Welcome to now.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that as well. And you're saying that, and as you were saying that, I'm running in my head through all the experiences I've had that are dimensional shifting kind of things, and it's just amazing what's going on out there. Back to the conference and what's going on with that. Being that Steve was talking about the fact that Michael Sowell's going to be there.
Michael.
I was going to just say, any chance of getting information from Corey Good, because I know they work together.
Well, they do. In fact, it was Corey I was after first. Mm-hmm. And Corey was all excited, but for various reasons he backed out, and in the end he didn't even want to do it via Skype.
He's very introverted from what I understand.
He is very introverted, and anyway, I don't want to speculate on what reason he has, but I read Corey Good's stuff, and I'm probably a bit like Michael. Michael was one of these people who is in touch with quite a few alleged whistleblowers. Mm-hmm. He's particularly fascinated by people like Corey Good and others who come forward with detailed specifics about what they communicate about the secret civilization. In particular, like who the goodies, if there are any goodies, who are the baddies, what's going on. I'm fascinated by Corey Good's account. There's no proof of it. I'd love to meet the guy and get a handle on what he's like as a person. I did meet. You know how Corey Good is regularly interviewed on Guyam TV by David Wilcock. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Yeah, I won't say anything.
We won't either. Yeah.
Oh God! I will say though that the Guyam get frustrated at David. They keep reminding him he's the interviewer, not the talent. You can edit this bit out, but anyway, God bless them all.
Yeah.
But look, what I was curious about is I was meeting with the head of Guyam, a guy called Yerka, who's a very interesting chap. And Yerka, who owns Guyam, I was meeting with him and I said, Yerka, I've got to ask you. I said, David Wilcock has been saying that everyone at Guyam TV, including the skeptics, checked Corey Good out. We grilled him for days and they're satisfied with Corey Good, so that's why it's, going to air on Guyam TV. So I said to Yerka, tell me, I said, what does she think, And Yerka he's just like me. He said, look, we asked him questions, we asked him trick questions. There's no evidence, but there's no inconsistency. His whole body language, he didn't get defensive, angry. So Yerka, who's a very savvy guy, he said, I just can't fault it, so we're letting it go. I don't have a particular issue with it because there's no real discernible goody or baddie message being presented in there. Mm-hmm. The general picture is exactly what I believe is there's multiple factions of people, including humans and non-humans, working together on some projects, competing on others, and in between hand, variously doing things to make sure Earth, hangs in there. A lot of people really believed Earth would be destroyed, mankind wiped out, and a new race and a new consciousness would be seeded. Everybody expected that to happen back in the 70s. It didn't happen in the 90s. The predicted catastrophes have not happened on planet Earth. More and more people are saying mankind passed some form of test a few decades ago. We will give them the right to exist as a new species on the block, and will be afforded cooperation like any society would look after a new species. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I do feel that we're getting some form of help in our planetary passage through space and time and dimensions, because from some of the insider information I've had, we've dodged a few bullets that were coming our way, and we're still here. So I feel if anything, there's more desire for mankind to survive and go further. But who will be in control is probably going to be the big thing. I like to see mankind be in control of mankind. and everybody taking such personal responsibility that we have peace and harmony. But there may be those who convince us that we're not ready for that, and I'll be resisting them too.
True. Another interesting guest you have at the conference is Brendan Murphy, who's talking about DNA activation and accelerating our awakening.
I've got no idea how it works or what it's about, but I really like Brendan. I love his energy. I'm finding that more and more of the speakers are old fuddy-duddies in their box, and Brendan strikes me as young, energetic. I want to hear what he has to say. I've watched his path, if you like. I've watched what he's taken on board, and I like what he's doing with it. And I'd love to give him a platform and see what he does with it. So I'm trying to give him what I call the equivalent of a break on the speaker circuit, so that he can go out and get invited to do more. I just know I love his energy. I'm really curious to hear what he's talking about. As you know, working with Tangoing information with that RAND group, one of the big things that they were expecting in the near future was an event which would change all humans. Now, whether that change was including death, they were a bit ambiguous about, but they were very insistent that all humans with a certain type of DNA sequence would experience the changes differently from the rest. There was a lot of discussion whether the people with the DNA difference would be the ones that were died, the ones that were scooped up by hungry aliens, or the ones that survived. I don't know. But there is, I do have interest in the whole concept that some people physically have in their structure a type of response mechanism waiting to be activated by an event happening in the future. And so I'm going to listen with interest to see what Brendan says about DNA activation and on that topic. And more power to him.
Yeah, it's a topic that a lot of people are bringing up from various different points of view. I'll be curious myself to find out what Brendan has to say.
I think deep down in people, especially people attracted to this sort of information, we feel, let's put it this way, we feel we want a planet of peace and harmony where everyone is responsible for their actions and mature. And I don't know, I feel there's a growing sense of, do we really have to be wiped out and start again? Hasn't that happened so many times in the past? Can't we do something different? Can't we wake up in the dream? Can't we take our bodies with us? Can't we do something different? So I'll be interested to see how we manifest that experience or not. If we do manifest that experience, something in our physical structure will be different on those who take a different path. I'm not saying there's any bad path or any good path. In my world, there is no right or wrong. There is no good or evil. There is only actions and reactions, really. And if you don't like the experience of a reaction, you need to examine what action you put out there into the universe that attracted it back. One of the interesting things I learned from speaking to Aboriginal elders decades ago, they're all dead now, but I won't mention their names, is that they have two fundamental approaches to life which sort of stuck with me. I guess they resonate. Number one was they did not view time as linear, so they don't see themselves in the now with a past and a future in a particular straight line. They see time as planar, circular, if you like. Totally different perspective.
Beyond 3 D.
Now, the other thing these Aboriginal elders told me about was their fundamental belief of how consciousness, mankind's consciousness, talking to these Aboriginal elders, one of the things that really blew me away was their understanding of consciousness and how consciousness causes immediate and eventual repercussions in their lives. We were talking about strange weather events in different parts of Australia to a couple of Aboriginal elders back in the 80s, and they explained to me that in their understanding, your consciousness goes out into the universe and attracts its reflection in the form of events, whether they're involving people or no people or animals, etc. Your consciousness puts out a frequency, the universe presents you with the reflection of that frequency, which is usually obviously going to be somewhere in your immediate area of experience. What they were totally believing was that there was a tone to the frequency that mankind puts out, like a harmony or a disharmony. Disharmonious tones cause the sun, in particular, in our solar system, to reflect back to the Earth the reflection of mankind's consciousness. So the Aboriginals believe that everything that happens to the planet Earth is a result of mankind's general tone and the degree of harmony in that tone or the degree of disharmony. Putting out a disharmonious tone causes very significant earth changes, disasters, and there are even lines of thought, not just with the Aboriginals, that due to the existence of a charged ether, a physical, non-physical ether, permeating all of space and time, underlying matter, I mean, you're not any strangers to the idea of an ether in between the planets. Well, let's take that ether one step further. It's the ether which is underneath, if you like, all of reality, the ether from which matter is formed. Their understanding is that the consciousness goes out into space, and if you are putting out negative, bad frequency, disharmonious thoughts, that we become, if you like, magnetically attractive to charged rocks. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is there is a school of thought, and it's being considered by scientists, is that mankind's consciousness might actually be the thing which attracts doomsday asteroids into hitting us. But they will veer off their path and be attracted into hitting Earth to reflect the nature. So what I'm saying is this is why it's very important to be totally responsible for your actions and thoughts. If you have a self-destructive thought, your body usually reflects it and you get a self-destructive disease or a disease which you interpret as the body destroying itself. Often the immune system diseases are actually the immune system, which is working fine, destroying the body because the signal is that the body is an invader. Self-destructive thoughts, we can pretty much prove affect your physical health. But what if on a global scale you get mankind to see itself very negatively? Now, what's happening in Western civilization right now is more and more people are saying, oh, mankind's ruining the planet. I hear and see on forums more and more people saying mankind should be wiped out. More and more greenies are saying man is an invasive, intrusive species. There is a form of growing self-hatred for the species, by the species in the West. And that ain't going to have a happy ending, I can tell you. It's something that has to be averted. And again, it just yells out, we need a new understanding of reality so that we see ourselves as part of a giant harmony where things are not going wrong, rather than this mechanistic, life is survival of the fittest, the fit have the right to survive, and life in the first place is just a huge accident. We don't even understand how it happened.
Yes,
I mean, the bizarre thing about these rationalist, mechanistic scientists is, at the end of the day, they look out at the world and they believe everything they see has created itself out of nothing for no reason, and they're happy with that. And to me, that is the most insane thing. But we break it down into piecemeal little steps, Big Bang, then this, then this, then this, then this. Nobody who believes in science really goes back and fills in the gaps between those steps. If they used their actual professed knowledge of science, you cannot ever show how an inanimate object becomes animate unless they're all alive in the first place. So we've either got to go back and say that atoms and molecules and electrons and protons are actually alive, or if they're not and they're inanimate, then whatever makes a body alive has to be determined to be that consciousness exists and is alive. But of course, these are concepts which are known to the elite. They're kept out of the minds of man purely for social control. We could be educating our kids into what I've just told you, into an amazing harmony with nature, but that's not being allowed. So it's a time of great change we're in, and I think we need to keep opening and expanding what our definitions of reality are from a scientific point of view, so that we understand the structure of our reality from a complete point of view.
Well, let's look at it quickly from Duncan, from a political point of view, especially being that what's going on in the West, as far as the United States is concerned. I just wanted to get your opinion on the political forums that are going on over there right now and the election coming up, because, quite frankly, either way, the term I use is, there's a saying called the devil you know is better, or better the devil you know is the saying. In this case, it might be better the devil you don't know, but that's just my opinion. What's your opinion on what's going on that way?
Well, I'm quite baffled. It looks to me like Trump's a wild card out of left field, which is generally rocking the establishment. At the same time, the background context is power is going from America in the West to the East. China and Russia are on the ascendant. So it's almost as if the people who run the show are thinking, well, we don't need America anymore. We've got all the benefits of all her money for our secret civilization and our technology. America's pretty screwed up. We're putting our energy and stuff into the East. We don't care who runs America. If I'm wrong, and if Trump is elected, if Trump starts to get accurate briefings, then and starts to do what JFK did, which is attack the hand that feeds him, dismantle the intelligence agencies, get in control put the government in control of issuing currency. If Trump does that, then he's woken up. And he's having a go at what Lincoln and Kennedy did. And look what happened to both of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Their shot is often in full view of the public, and the rulers get away with it as a message to the other world rulers not to try what they did, even if you're in charge of the so-called most powerful country in the world. There's already news items. Trump's already receiving security briefings. They consider him such a possible contender that they're running him in parallel and giving him security and intelligence briefings. Now, if Trump believes those, he's at the mercy of whatever he's told. He would need his own security and intelligence people giving him trusted news and information. So if he goes down the mainstream route and trusts the military-industrial complex, they're giving him accurate information, we're all screwed. Nothing's going to change. We have Prime Minister John Howard being told by that military-industrial complex that people like Saddam Hussein had made human paper shredders and putting them through it. It's the Germans eating babies. It's the Iraqis putting babies into, pulling them out of the incubators. It's total bullshit. But you have world leaders falling for it, making emotive statements. I mean, John Howard, they had him in New York. They knew 9/11 was going down. They had him over there, so he would come back to Australia all emotionally shook up. I was there. What had happened? And we've just been, it's like a gang of thugs. You've got a master brain somewhere who never gets his hands dirty. And he's got a big bully boy and a couple of good-looking, less bully boys with specific talents. America is a big bully boy. Australia is one of the thugs that does everything it says because it's too stupid to know what's really going on. We're really good at what we do. We have this totally, propagandized thing. Australians were sent, to fight Anzacs and, we fight for freedom. I mean, honestly, people tear up over this bullshit and they don't even know what happened in history. The first wave of people to go over to fight the Germans, people trying to escape wives, pregnancies and deaths. They were criminals. I mean, you had a few patriotic ones. But, I mean, the history was not the war hero. We were sent over by force, bullied, cajoled. I mean, the stupid ones go first because they believe in the bullshit and they think that the Germans are eating babies. I mean, I hate to say this. I know I've got ancestors and relatives who fought and died, and I wish that somebody had spoken up and had woken them up and said, what the hell are you doing? This is absolute bullshit. But there's such an emotional impetus, such emotional momentum, and that's where the thing is. If Trump is briefed by that same military intelligence community that runs everything, then America will just do what they want. If Trump bites the hands that feed him, they will remove him. Frankly, and I'll make a prediction here, I will be surprised if the election goes through determination. I have a really strong feeling something big will happen. They will issue martial law, and Obama will either do another term because he's such a puppet and does everything he's told, or they will install someone else because we're being attacked or something. There'll be some disaster or catastrophe and some form of announcement will be announced, and I don't believe the election will go through.
Duncan, you're not the first person I've heard say that.
That's my prediction based on events now. After in 3 weeks, I might have a completely different story.
Beyond 3 D.
My other general big picture is that you've had a bunch of people appointed to run the planet who've done a good job, but somebody is there's some form of shift change going on, some change of command. That command shift change is going to the east. Whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. It looks like there's top-down approval. So the power is moving to the east, away from the west, economically, militarily. They don't seem warlike and expansive. However, the downside is they seem very hive-minded, very materialistic, not very spiritual, very mechanistic, more for the good of the whole mentality. It could be a good thing. It might not. We might get peace, but at a cost of servitude, and it might be the loss of personal freedom. I don't know. Whenever a shift change goes down and the people who were given control of the party, who've made their own nests and castles, they often will resist it and try and make problems. And there's signs that that's been going on. Apart from that, I don't know. I like to think good things are happening behind the scenes. I like to think consciousness is increasing and that people are waking up. More and more people are making their little bright light shine brighter and brighter so other people can see. And I'd like to think that accelerates exponentially and we have a mass awakening. We're blinded by the light, and after we stop blinking and look around, we see a whole new world. That's what I'd like to see. And, you know, it sounds like utopia and it sounds far-fetched. But when you've done as much thinking and reading and research as I have, you realise at the end of the day, it's all about consciousness and what that consciousness perceives as real and what it does with that information. If consciousness is the driving force in the universe and the universe is responsive to consciousness, if the universe is responsive to consciousness like I think it is, then literally anything can happen on an individual level or a mass level. But you've got to contemplate that as a possibility. If you stick to your mechanistic, life is a survival of the fittest, the fit of the right to survive, or God waves the magic wand. Mate is all born in sin, so we'd feel bad every day, but if we say prayers, go to something. I mean, can you believe the bullshit we've put up with for thousands of years? Can you believe that we've gone out and we've killed people who didn't believe in this? We've tortured them. We've done incredible atrocities, It's time to wake up and learn from what we've done.
Now, Duncan, we want to thank you for the time that you've spent with us. Now, the Nexus conference is coming up from the 18th to the 20th of June, and it is up on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and we will put the information up on all of our web pages and Facebook pages for all the listeners out there. Real quickly, as a parting gift in a sense, I'd like to know, because the last time we were together you talked about the Loosh story. And this time I wanted to know, since that point in time, it's been about a year, what in the last few months has really gotten you to sit back and go, whoa, what is that?
I hate to say it, but there's, nothing and everything in some ways. Once you start to rearrange how you look at the world and you start experimenting with a new point of view, that becomes exciting because, as I said before, no matter what belief you have, the universe will validate it via reflecting reality back to you. So that itself is an experiment. So you can start to look at what you do. I've been experimenting with other perspectives and just looking at at what happens in the world. I guess what's new for me is, and I still totally accept the Loosh story. I believe that when I talk about creatures who came here, modified humans into being the race that we are, obviously there are scales of reality above those creatures. People will refer to those as the Anunnaki, but somebody created the Anunnaki, somebody created them who created the Anunnaki, assuming time is structured that way. So somewhere along the line, I do believe that one of the main reasons for the existence of the first human bodies on this planet was to broadcast those feelings. The Anunnaki also feed off the energy released by humans at the point of death, especially if there's fear involved. All the religions which involved human sacrifices, blood, animal sacrifices, that's all Anunnaki feeding. We were used also for mining, doing physical labour, sex. We're a species which puts out multiple resources, a bit like a sheep. Puts out wool, puts out milk. At the end of the day, you can eat them. It's not that different with humans from other species, and we need to grow up a bit and shun the revulsion and the distaste at that whole concept. We feel perfectly happy about raising a chicken in our backyard, giving it the best food and water, and after a year, most of us have no qualms thinking, okay, we'll kill it now, and I've got Sunday dinner. And you can love that. You can look after, care protect it from predators, give it a good quality of life, and then eat it. And we feel no guilt, we feel no shame, we feel no repulsion at what we're doing. But if another species came along and did that to us, we would be outraged.
Yeah.
See the hypocrisy. We have to grow up and see reality for what it is and get rid of these little moral hypocrisy things that we're on. And and the vegetarians out there, we know a lot of vegetarians are not eating meat because they feel animals are alive and, but plants, I can demonstrate just as much reality. The plants have feelings, they can feel intent. They are alive, sentient organisms.
That's right.
Yeah.
And vegetarians will happily eat those, thinking, doesn't matter if I kill a plant, but, so we're differentiating between life forms. So the life form of a plant is less of value than the life form of an animal. We need to grow up and recognise that consciousness is what there is. Whatever form that consciousness expresses itself into, it doesn't matter whether it expresses itself as a bacteria or a creature the size of 10 planets that walks through space living off the ether. It doesn't matter the form. What there is consciousness expressing in forms. And this planet is got billions and billions of them. Our own physical bodies, by number, only 10% of the number of cells in your body are human cells. If you counted up all the cells in your body, 90% of them belong to other life forms. Sure, the human cells are bigger, and so by space, it takes up, we're human, but by number, we're actually 90% non-human, and we need those other life forms to survive, and this is what mankind has to grow up and recognise. It's part of the process of taking responsibility, and the first part of taking responsibility is to re-examine what you believe, and do you need it? Is it serving you, or are you serving it? Because there's no reason why you need to serve your beliefs when your beliefs can serve you, and that's what I'm experimenting with at the moment.
Fantastic.
Well, Duncan, once again, thank you so much for appearing on Soul to Soul and on Beyond 3D. You were a very, very popular guest last year, and we're very pleased to have you back on this year.
I've got to say, guys, there's something about you guys which brings a frequency of talking out that I don't really experience anywhere else. So I've got to say, it's always a pleasure talking to you guys. I listen to myself talking as much as you do.
Oh,
and I really enjoy it. It's nice not to have boring, mundane questions. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. You have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for your time, Duncan. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Beyond 3.
Matt, that was sensational.
Oh, I'm telling you. What was great about the interview with Duncan was I got to ask him about the person we interviewed the prior week, which was Stan Deo, because they knew each other back in the 70s, and as Duncan said, he was one of the first attendees of a conference, or speakers, at one of the conferences that they did down here. So it was great to tie all of that together, but it's just a fun time listening to Duncan wax philosophic about what's going on in the world because he has such great information and great contact.
Great contacts, that was exactly what I was about to say. So many people who know so much more than what's actually being put out there into the universe.
Oh, absolutely.
He facilitates all that.
And that's the thing about it. You can see, and I think what happens is when you facilitate that and you hear people, you're talking to people, you're in their company, you can tell, especially if you've been in this industry for a number of decades, who's telling you the truth, who's selling you a story, etc., etc. And based on that, some of the fantastic information the man has, it's just a pleasure to talk to him, and I would be looking forward to that conference.
I really want to get up there.
Yeah, so do I.
We have to go.
We have to think about a way of doing that. We have a month to do it.
And can also say thank you to Steve and Patricia from Soul to Soul.
Absolutely.
That was great. That was awesome for them filling in.
Them facilitating and filling in there was fantastic.
They really are. They really are our big sister show, aren't they?
Yes.
And anyone who hasn't listened to Soul, do yourself a favour this week.
Listen to it. It's worth your time.
We're out of time.
Yes, we are. So, thanks, Clint.
Thank you, Matt.
And we will see you guys next week for another edition of Beyond 3D.
Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.